One of the most powerful moves you can make after a breakup is absolute silence. I don't mean the passive-aggressive kind where you're waiting for a reaction. I'm talking about total, deliberate disengagement. No calls, no texts, no just checking in messages. You vanish. You disappear from his emotional map. And here's why that works on a level most people don't even realize. Human beings crave predictability in their emotional attachments. When you were in that relationship, even if it was unstable or unfulfilling, you were part of his routine, part of his psychological infrastructure. Whether he showed it or not, he had constructed mental shortcuts around your presence. You were, in effect, a stabilizing feature in his internal world. When you suddenly withdraw without explanation, it creates a disruption, a vacuum. And nature, as well as the human mind, abhors a vacuum. Most people, especially those who initiate or appear indifferent during a breakup, assume they've won some sort of power game. But what they don't anticipate is the existential discomfort that follows when the other person offers nothing in return. No protest, no tears, no desperate messages, just stillness. That stillness is louder than any confrontation could ever be because it forces them to face themselves, not just you. It's like looking into a mirror and finding no reflection. That absence triggers a deep psychological response, introspection, and often regret. Now, from a philosophical standpoint, what you're doing is reclaiming your agency. You are choosing not to be reactive, and that choice is an act of strength, not weakness. The Stoics talked about this. Marcus Aurelius, for example, emphasized that your power lies in your response, not in external events. By choosing silence, you're exerting control over your emotional reality. You're no longer participating in a narrative you didn't write. This isn't about playing games, it's not manipulation, it's restoration. Because when you remove your energy from someone who took it for granted, they're left to confront the loss in its rawest form. And if he ever cared, even a little, that absence will start to sting. Not immediately, because most people coast on ego for a while, but eventually when the dust settles and his distractions dry up, he'll start to feel it. He'll wonder why you didn't chase, why you didn't fight, why you didn't need closure. And that not knowing, that void becomes the very thing that keeps you lodged in his mind. So stop explaining yourself. Stop sending mixed signals. Silence is clarity. It communicates. I value myself enough not to beg for scraps of attention. And believe me, that message will land deeper than any long-winded conversation ever could. Sometimes the loudest thing you can say is nothing at all. After silence, the next most potent response isn't revenge, it's transformation. Not the kind that's for show, not a shallow attempt to spark jealousy. I'm talking about a deep structural evolution. You level up, not for him, for you. And this is where the emotional weight of the breakup shifts dramatically. You see, in the immediate aftermath of a breakup, most people spiral. They stay stuck in the gravitational pull of the relationship. They obsess over what went wrong. They fixate on what the other person is doing, and they shrink themselves emotionally. That reaction is normal, but it's not helpful because every moment you spend consumed by his absence is a moment you're not investing in your presence. And if you want him to feel the loss, not just notice it, but internalize it, then the only real path forward is to evolve beyond the version of yourself that existed when you were with him. Psychologically, this taps into something deeply primal. We are wired to respond to status shifts. And I don't mean superficial status, I mean perceived competence, growth, vitality. When someone detaches from us and we see them thriving, we're forced to reevaluate our assumptions. That's the foundation of regret. Regret isn't usually about what happened. It's about the realization that we failed to recognize value while we had access to it. And nothing triggers that realization faster than seeing someone grow into the version of themselves we didn't believe they could become. So start there. Don't pretend to be better. Become better. Build your body, sharpen your mind, upgrade your environment, surround yourself with people who respect your boundaries, take up space not just socially but existentially, rebuild your routine, reestablish your standards, and reimagine your purpose. Every small act of improvement, every inch of progress sends a signal, not to him directly, but to the universe and to yourself. I am no longer defined by who left me. Now, here's the part people miss. This isn't about being seen. If he happens to see it, fine. But the deeper truth is that when you stop needing to be seen, you become magnetic. There's something incredibly powerful about someone who no longer needs external validation to feel valuable. And when that becomes your baseline, not a performance, but your actual identity, that's when the tables turn. That's when he starts to feel the gravity shift. Philosophically, this is about individuation. Carl Jung spoke of it as the process of becoming whole. It requires the courage to confront the parts of yourself that were neglected, to integrate what was fragmented during the relationship. And from that integration comes strength, clarity, and peace. So don't just get over him. Outgrow the version of yourself that settled for him, because when you rise authentically, relentlessly, he won't just feel the breakup. He'll feel the gap between the woman he thought you were and the woman you actually became. Let your evolution be the echo that reminds him of what he lost.
The third principle is crucial, and it's where many people unknowingly lose their footing. After a breakup, there's a strong impulse to monitor the other person, to track their moves, to decode their actions. You may not realize it, but every moment you spend thinking about what he's doing, who he's with, whether he misses you, whether he's suffering, is a moment you're surrendering your power. What you're doing psychologically is handing him the steering wheel to your emotional life. That needs to stop. When you reclaim your energy, your time, your attention, your thoughts, you begin to reconstruct yourself as the central figure in your own narrative. And that's not just empowering, it's necessary. See, relationships, even toxic or imbalanced ones, create neural patterns. Your brain becomes wired to respond to his presence, to his approval, to his rejection. And after the breakup, your system is still looking for that stimulus. So when you check his social media or reread old messages or fantasize about what he's thinking, you're feeding a loop that no longer serves you. It's like scratching a wound that needs to heal. From a psychological standpoint, the energy you pour into someone else becomes an investment. And post-breakup, you need to divest emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You need to pull your investment out of his world and put it back into yours. This is not about being heartless. It's about self-preservation. Because every time you obsess over whether he cares, you reinforce the belief that your worth is dependent on his recognition of it. And that belief, left unchecked, will erode your confidence and your clarity. You have to understand something. People can feel when they're no longer being fed your energy. It's like emotional oxygen being cut off. He may not say it, and he may not even realize it right away, but when your thoughts, your reactions, and your availability are no longer orbiting him, a shift occurs. Suddenly, he's not the gravitational center. And that's disorienting, especially for someone who expected you to remain tethered to his presence. Philosophically, this is about sovereignty, about reclaiming your role as the author of your own experience. Viktor Frankl, who survived unthinkable trauma, wrote that between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space lies our power to choose. Your X may be the stimulus, but your response is still yours. And when you choose to redirect your energy inward toward growth, discipline, and purpose, you break the dependency that gave him emotional leverage in the first place. So stop checking on him. Stop interpreting silence as rejection or absence as power. Pull your attention inward. Channel it into rebuilding, not unraveling. Because when you stop feeding the story of him, you begin writing the story of you. The moment you stop giving him your energy is the moment he starts to feel the cost of losing it. One of the most common traps people fall into after a breakup is trying to elicit a reaction to make the other person feel jealous, regretful, even hurt. And while on the surface that might seem like a form of empowerment, a way of taking back control, in truth, it's just another variation of dependence. Because at its core, trying to make him jealous is still about him. You're still orbiting his attention. You're still seeking validation just through indirect means. And that is not freedom. The moment you center your actions around getting a response from someone who devalued you, you've already lost the higher ground. You've placed your emotional trajectory in the hands of the very person who fractured it. What may feel like confidence is often just performance. And the problem with performing is that it requires an audience. If he doesn't notice, if he doesn't respond, the act collapses. And so does the illusion of power. Instead, the real psychological shift, the one that genuinely affects him and liberates you, is indifference. Not feigned indifference, not coldness disguised as strength, but genuine detachment. The kind that says, I am no longer emotionally available to this dynamic at all. That level of self-possession sends a signal that is far more profound than any attempt at provocation. You've moved on. And more importantly, you're not looking back. And that hits different. Because indifference doesn't just remove you from his control, it reflects something he likely didn't anticipate, that he no longer matters to your inner world, that you are no longer emotionally reactive to his presence or absence. And for someone whose sense of self was partially reinforced by your attachment, that realization can be psychologically destabilizing. It removes the ego boost, the fallback option, the narrative that he was irreplaceable. Philosophically, this taps into what Nietzsche would describe as the will to power. Not dominance over others, but mastery of self. When you shift from external displays to internal transformation, you begin to cultivate true power, the kind that doesn't need to be proven or seen. You begin living in alignment with your values rather than your wounds. And from that place, you stop asking, how do I make him see what he lost? And start declaring, he is no longer relevant to the woman I'm becoming. Jealousy is cheap. Relevance is earned. And when you become genuinely unavailable, when you're too occupied with your growth, your healing, your joy, that is when the weight of your absence begins to register. So don't waste energy trying to provoke a response. Let your peace, your silence, your complete disinterest speak for you. When he realizes you no longer need him to notice, that's when he starts to notice.
This taps into a deeply embedded psychological dynamic. People don't expect you to rise without them. They expect you to stay entangled. They expect you to replay old conversations, seek closure, leave a door open. And when you don't, when you instead become sharper, more grounded, more at peace, it creates cognitive dissonance. Because now he's confronted with a version of you that undermines the narrative he told himself about who you were. Maybe he dismissed you, underestimated you, even thought you'd struggle without him. But growth, real growth, forces him to confront that misjudgment. And ego hates to be wrong. From a philosophical standpoint, this is the essence of self-realization. Kierkegaard wrote about the idea of becoming a self, not simply being who you are by default, but choosing to become who you were meant to be through conscious reflection and action. When you embody that idea, when your healing is no longer performative but authentic, it sends a message, not to him directly, but into the psychological field where your relationship once existed. He may hear about you through mutual friends, see a glimpse of your evolution online, or notice that you're no longer present in any way that feeds his ego. And that's when the real sting begins, when you're gone, but better. When he recognizes what he lost, not because you shouted it, but because your silence and your self-possession made it undeniable. And let's be honest, if you have to tell someone what they lost, they haven't truly lost it. Real loss is felt in absence. It's realized in reflection. And that realization only comes when you stop trying to force it. You become the evidence, not through revenge, not through a spectacle, but through quiet, disciplined evolution. So don't announce your comeback. Live it. Let your life become the mirror he didn't know he was going to have to look into. And when he does, when he sees that you flourished without him, the echo of your absence will say everything you never had to Now let who you've become be the closure he didn't see coming. How we come to the final and perhaps most misunderstood element of making someone truly feel the gravity of your absence: being unavailable. Not just physically, but emotionally. This isn't about pretending you've moved on. It's about restructuring your priorities so thoroughly that he's no longer on the list. And here's the psychological depth of it. Availability isn't just about time or proximity. It's about access, emotional access, energetic access. When you were in that relationship, he had access to your empathy, your reassurance, your attention. Even in conflict, even in silence, there was an invisible thread tethering your identity to his validation. Cutting that thread truly and completely requires more than blocking a number or avoiding texts. It requires a reconfiguration of the internal hierarchy. You place your peace above his curiosity. You place your future above his comfort. You stop acting as if he still gets to be part of your emotional landscape simply because he once was, and that's difficult. Because on some level, your mind is conditioned to interpret his reappearances, whether direct or subtle, as an invitation for closure, conversation, or perhaps reconciliation. But here's the truth. If he really valued the connection, you wouldn't be having to measure your worth through his absence in the first place. When he tries to come back, and there's a good chance he will, it often won't be with clarity. It'll be with confusion, curiosity, or shallow nostalgia. And in those moments, you'll be tested because a part of you will want to respond, to show how far you've come, to prove that you're no longer broken by what broke you. But that's still a form of giving him access. The real challenge and the real power is in remaining unavailable, not out of malice, but out of mastery. Philosophically, this speaks to the principle of boundaries as an act of self-definition. As Jean-Paul Sartre pointed out, we are condemned to be free, meaning that we must define ourselves through our choices. And every time you choose not to respond, not to explain, not to entertain half measures or ambiguous returns, you are choosing yourself, not as a statement against him, but as a commitment to your future. Being unavailable isn't a strategy. It's a symptom of growth. It means you're now living in a space he can no longer reach, not because you're hiding, but because you've outgrown the dynamics that made that relationship possible in the first place. And nothing will make him feel the breakup more than realizing that the version of you he once had access to no longer exists and cannot be summoned back. So when he circles back, don't open the door just to prove you could have. Let the silence answer. Let your absence remain unshaken. The strongest message you'll ever send is the one that doesn't need to be delivered because you're no longer available to receive his.